The Gates of Justice. These titanic gates have been a giant mystery quite literally forever, but I think I might have just solved it. You see, recently I've been on this weird mission to solve all of the hidden secrets of the world government, the giant bridges they're making, the giant prison below the sea Impel Down that looks like an ancient tower, and now it's time I think we talk about the 3 gates that might just actually be sealing away an ancient god, the one in Ennis Lobby, these ones right here, the Gates of Justice. Now, in case you're not familiar with the fine architecture of the world government, I got you, because we first bore witness to the Gates of Justice during Ennis Lobby, and then again during Impel Down and Marineford 2. Which makes a lot of sense because each of these 3, and I can't stress enough how crazy big they are, absurdly massive doors of steel and stone are located at one of the world government's 3 major strongholds, as you can see here on this handy little graph that Oda gave us in chapter 522. In a nutshell, simply opening one of them messes with the entire ocean, creating massive whirlpools as we learned during Ennis Lobby, and inside of them is a current that oddly seems to spin outwards, contained by the gates for the world government to use. It is crazy fast and helps them get from point A to point B in like a third of the time, if not even faster than that, basically speed traveling in between these 3 locations. So, why am I even talking about them today? Well, in the wake of God Valley ending, I've been looking back at some of the stuff from Elbaf, and recently we got a massive reveal that the Abyssal Mark has 3 stages, which really stood out to me, because immediately that pattern of 3 reminded me of the giant Gates of Justice, and then I looked more into my boy Davy the Xebec here. You know me, I love digging deep and dirty into the lore of characters to figure out what I've been missing all along, and well, it kinda made me realize that Xebec has a power feed that really went undetected, which was both insane and also kind of makes no sense. Because in chapter 1155, after Xebec and Harold first meet, there's a line here that got tossed out pretty casually for what it actually was. The narrator tells us that sometime later, Xebec attacked a ship with a heavenly tribute en route to Sacred Merijoa, and with this ship and money, Rox dove into the pirating business. Now, I can see that I lost you a little bit. Okay, you might be asking, what does this have to do with the gates, Manu? Well, you didn't actually let me finish, because tossed in there, strategically left out by me, sorry to build some suspense for this video, is another line. Because the box also says, not only that, Xebec destroyed the Gates of Justice and fled once again. Boom! Gates, right there. Gotcha. Alright. I remember when the chapter came out, I found this absolutely mind-boggling, like, how did one man destroy this titanic gate bigger than entire kingdoms in the One Piece world? But what I failed to talk about and realize was, why did he even do that? Why would Xebec go out of his way to destroy one of the Gates of Justice, right? And does it tie into the Abyss marking somehow that we now know about? Because we know he wasn't trapped in it because he was leaving from the Holy Land, you know, smack-talking Emu, unless the secret exit from Merijoa goes out into that whirlpool, but that would be kind of weird. So I think he could not really have ended up in the Tarai Current and needed to escape through a Gate of Justice from where he started. That kind of doesn't really pan out, I think. So again, unless there is some secret tunnel or escape that, you know, exits you in the middle of this whirlpool, it doesn't make sense. The question then is, why did he do it? Well, one argument could be pretty simple. He did it to slow down the world government. They were probably chasing after him, but like, did he though? I mean, we do know that the gates can be opened and the current that they use stays contained, so why destroy it? Just to mess with Emu? I feel like there's a lot more to this than we originally thought. I feel like Oda is leaving us a massive breadcrumb that probably is only going to make sense like 100 chapters from now. Because what I think is that Xebec, with his deep knowledge of the One Piece lore, knew that these gates are containing something much older and much more powerful that would be essential to taking down Emu. Remember, they just came from that little meetup that they had where they were threatening Emu, and that way Xebec could achieve his dream of conquering the world, maybe. And so I kind of began to really take a deep look at these gates for the first time, because they've been bugging me for a while, and man, do they really stick out in One Piece like a sore thumb. Like seriously, when you really look at them, and I mean really look and think about them. The Gates of Justice don't match world government architecture, and they don't make a lot of sense in general. Here you'll see what I mean when I show it to you side by side. Look at Marijua. It's sleek, it's ornate, it's clean, they use high columns and wide plazas and beautiful, intricate designs. It's incredibly fashionable, like me. And now to contrast that sleek design, let's look at the Ennis Lobby Gate. It's a rough, colossal steel door with giant bolts and steel plating. I would say overall it's got a very brutal and industrial style to it, very efficiency based, right? So I would argue that these gates are architecturally not exactly modern by the great Imu-sama's current standards, but they do very much match the design of an era that we have seen before, the first world of One Piece. The mural from chapter 1138. I love you so much. You're the gift that keeps on giving. The first One Piece world, at least what we see in the mural, has this super industrial revolution style of representation. Big gears, smokestacks, and steel plating. And I say that because we do see characters like Emeth, an ancient robot from the Void Century, who are super advanced on the inside, but have this rougher outer design to them, you know, this like sci-fi steampunk kind of vibe. And I at least very much feel like these gates do look like they're from a land lost to time itself. This ancient time where, you know, technology was so crazy they just could build these giant country-sized gates. Now, if you don't want to believe me, how about we just use some logic here for a second, man, all right? Who builds 3 massive giant gates underwater? Like, half the damn gate is below the ocean level. That's an absolute pain to build, and I don't think that the world government actually has the means to complete that. Looking at, you know, how long things are taking with the giant bridges and everything, they're not building that overnight. And it's actually pretty much the same situation as Impel Down, which is located at one of those gates. They do make way more sense being built before the world ever got flooded by 200 meters. Like, I don't know, maybe in an era we know was actually dominated by gigantic creatures. We have seen their skeletons with places like Onigashima. Forgot about that one. Or we do know that there are these giant weapons and objects around, like the sword on Elbaf, the Onigashima katana. The early world matches these gates to a T, I think. All right, so I think you kind of get my entry point, my main point here. From this, we can now come to some very, very interesting conclusions, I think. Number one, the gates very, very likely predate the world government, meaning that they had some sort of function before the Marines ever existed. The government is maintaining or guarding a system that they inherited from the past, and someone with a really big paintbrush just slapped on the world government logo on them, being like, hey, this belongs to us, no boy. And like, world government approved. So this begs the question, if these gates are from the Void Century or even from the First World, what is Imu using them for besides slightly increased travel speeds, which, you know, like, good for them, but that's not a reason for Oda to introduce these things. I think we can all agree. And well, I'll just spare you the trouble of building some crazy suspense this time around, because I believe that these gates are some sort of sealing mechanism. Essentially, to me, they kind of feel like a tri-lock prison containing something much older than the world government itself. And this might sound crazy at first, until we realize that, well, Imu is pretty much the type to do that exact same thing, right? Imu uses ancient tech still to this day, like the ancient weapon Uranus, probably, that Imu seemingly used to destroy Lucia. I kind of think that these gates were originally not Imu's. Maybe they were using them for a completely different purpose. But Imu then took them, painted them, repurposed them to seal away some powerful creature or beast. Something or someone that Davy Xebec was actually preparing to free. That's why I think he destroyed it, kind of testing out how hard it would be to take them down. But come on, right? Surely that's insane to think. Why would I think that Oda would use these 3 giant gates as a prison for something? there's definitely no real-world mythology that Oda might have been pulling from that I uncovered that would lead me to this exact conclusion, right? Well, it's Oda, so of course there is. Now, I wouldn't blame you for not realizing this at first, because Oda, seemingly hit their purpose with their entire current name. Like, when you first hear the names Gates of Justice, your brain probably just leans more towards world government, the Marines' justice system and law and everything. But mythologically, well, I kind of hate to break it to you, but gates almost never represent law. Sorry, Trafalgar. Issue. The most famous mythological gates represent thresholds, the boundaries between worlds, very much like heaven or hell, right? So let's talk about those types of gates first and then see what Oda might have been cooking up here. Because as we'll see, there are a lot of these gates in mythology from all over the world. Now, and generally these divine gates protect one of two things. The first being paradise, like heaven, good places, you know the one you want to go to, which, wouldn't you know, lines up with Oda's naming schemes because these gates are located in Paradise. That's the name for this section of the Grand Line, right in front of the Holy Land as well. Now, through my research, one standout myth that seemed to tie him really well actually was the Enuma Elish. If you're a fan of the Fate series, you probably recognize that. It's a famous Mesopotamian myth about the hero king Gilgamesh, also known as the oldest epic in the world, but it also features a god named Shamash. And Shamash, you see, how do I put this? Well, they were the ancient sun god of justice. Yeah, they passed through two great gates every single day, one at the new dawn, one at dusk. I don't know, it's kind of giving sun god and moon tribe from the Harley text vibes. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. I don't love it because it's only two gates and we got three gates, right? But something that is very interesting is that Shamash isn't just a sun god, he's also a judge. He is justice personified. And his gates weren't just symbolic either, right? They were actual cosmic machinery regulating divine order. Now, there's a lot of stuff in Mesopotamian lore that really ties very deeply into One Piece, including massive floods, god kings, giant primordial ocean gods being the big bad guy. A lot of fun stuff. Maybe I'll make a video on just that one day. If you want to see it, let me know. Ultimately, the idea of a sun god of justice having massive divine gates did make me wonder if maybe these gates were originally Nika's. And I can totally see a world where these things, clearly matching the first world's vibe, were actually built by, for, or with Nika in mind. And after Imu took over, they repurposed them for their own justice instead. Just painting on the gates of justice. But in One Piece, these gates clearly don't protect heaven at all, right? Like, well, they kind of do, but we know that One Piece's heaven is where the greatest demons actually live. Imu, the Gorosei, Charlos, mostly Charlos, and the whole gang of evil bad boys, they're all up there. So even though this first one was quite juicy, I want to move on now to the next set of mythological gates. We're just gonna keep cranking up the heat here. Something that feels way more in line with what I think these gates might actually be used for in One Piece. I did tell you already that I think that they are a three-way ceiling prison, and I'll show you why I think that next. In Hindu cosmology, the One Piece tie-ins become actually crazy hella specific. And when I say specific, I mean like a white girl Starbucks coffee order levels of specific. Yeah. In Hinduism, there are the three gates of liberation. Already off to a killer One Piece start here, dare I say. A warrior of liberation! Your gates are here! Well, sort of. These aren't actual physical gates this time. They are spiritual pathways that the soul passes through to escape the cycle of rebirth. They are metaphysical gates tied to enlightenment itself, and very much like good old Imu here, these gates represent the three concepts of emptiness, singlelessness, and wishlessness. Which to me really reminds me of the concepts of the void and the abyss and how Imu seems to want to crush people's dreams, right? I mean, Mu, the name that Imu gives themselves by the way, literally means nothingness in Japanese. It's the same kanji also as void and the void century and all these things. Same kanji that we see in the Harley text too. And they control the abyss, nothingness, and created the void century. It's all there really in black and white. Pretty clear as crystal, I think. But there is another side as well. Hinduism also has three gates of hell, representing destructive drives that bind the soul to suffering. Meaning that now we have two sets of 3 gates, each representing a spiritual threshold between liberation and imprisonment. And what are the gates of justice? Well, they are 3 gates that I believe are sealing away a mythical god, which wouldn't be insane to say since One Piece is a world obsessed with cycles, reincarnation, inherited will, ancient sins, the flowing of the ages, right, Roger stuff, and burdens carried by descendants and passed on into the future. And if you're now saying, I wish you could get even more specific on the 3 parts of this, I got you, little homie. Let Big Papa Manu show you what he's actually working with here. Let me introduce you to a little concept called tri-seals. And, you know, not seals as in the marine animal or the kiss from a rose singer. I mean like Naruto style shadow seal blah 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 no jutsu sort of seals, right? That's what we're talking about. Whenever there's an ancient myth that needs to lock away something truly catastrophic, it uses more than 1 lock, and a lot of the time, it's 3 locks. In Hindu mythology, Shiva's cosmic seals appear in triads. In Babylonian myth, the great primordial sea beast Tiamat is sealed away by the god Marduk by dividing the heavens, the earth, and the waters. A 3-fold sealing system that gives crazy One Piece vibes. And in Japanese mythology, the 3 sacred treasures act as seals protecting the imperial legitimacy and are used by the true ruler of Japan. They are also in One Piece by name through Kizaru's attacks, and the underworld god Izanami is said to block the entrance to the underworld with 3 progressive thresholds in old interpretations of Shinto mythology too. And to round us all off and pay tribute to Elbaf, where we are right now, Nordic mythology has a very famous tri-seal too, connected to a world-ended being, because Fenrir, the bringer of Ragnarok, son of Loki, is sealed away with the magic ribbon Gleipnir, a binding stone, and a sword wedged into its jaws. That is fairly metal, dude, and I love it. Let's see if we see something like that in Elbaf. So please understand that when Oda pulls from so many mythologies in his series, I don't think I'm too insane to speculate that there might be 3 gates belonging to Imu, a person obsessed with control and order and getting these tri-seal vibes instead. Which now actually brings us to the real meat and potatoes of this video. What is actually being sealed away with these gates? Is it a god? A king? A weapon? Well, it could be a lot of things, but there's one more big set of gates that Oda seems to be pulling from that makes me think that it's a character we've been hearing about since Long Ring Longland Island. Because I believe that the Gates of Justice are designed specifically to seal away none other than Davy Jones himself inside the abyss. And for it all to make sense, we have to break down the Greek Gates of Tartarus. Tartarus, in case you didn't know, is actually not a delicious sauce that you can put on your meat, but instead the deepest abyss in the underworld, which should really catch your attention since Big Dog Emu is all about the abyss, and Tartarus is more than just a big scary abyssal pit, it's the greatest prison within the underworld. It's where the primordial titans are being sealed away by the gods, specifically the king of the titans, Kronos, father of Zeus. So what we've basically got are massive bronze gates guarded by supernatural forces, ensuring ancient monsters never escape. Do you see where I'm getting with all of this, right? I hope so. I'm really doing my best here. Oda loves Greek mythology, right? You know that. We've got Uranus, named directly after a Greek primordial deity. We've got Amazon Lily, literally being the Amazons. Knight of God, Figalin Shamrock uses a Cerberus, and as the Holy Knight commander, he's Emu's biggest guard dog. So you see, when Oda needs a myth about, I don't know, an ancient monster that was sealed away by gods after a world-altering war, yeah, I think I'm not too crazy for assuming that he's pulling from the Greeks for this one as well. And this would actually line up incredibly well with the thing that started me down this entire rabbit hole first, Xebec, right? He destroyed the gate for a reason on his way out. And when you look at his plan and who he's a descendant of, I think it really all clicks together fairly nicely. Xebec is a member of the Davy clan, a descendant of Davy D. Jones, an ancient king of the One Piece world, presumably during the Void Century or the First World, the time of gods and mighty beasts. And we do know that Xebec was a mastermind trying to lay out a super big plan involving the Galela giants, 2 devil fruits, and, based on chapter 1166, Nika as well. And since Loki and Xebec's conversation made it very clear, I think, that Xebec thought that Herald could or should be Nika, we also know that based on the climax of God Valley, Emu and Davy Jones have some sort of serious ancient beef with their Tartarus sauce. And there's a promise in the Davy bloodline that Xebec needs to fulfill, failed to fulfill, and I guess now Blackbeard is gonna fulfill. So my big idea here is that it's none other than Davy D. frickin' Jones sealed away inside of the gates of justice beneath those swirling currents. Remember, we have never actually seen what is in the middle of these gates. Never. And Xebec's promise is to free his great ancestor, right? Someday the beast will be unleashed and Davy D. Jones will return to the One Piece world to help defeat Emu once and for all. At least that's what Xebec was planning on doing. Clearly he got Domi reversied and stabbed to death, but hey, it's the thought that counts. Surely his son will finish the job though, right? I mean, Blackbeard has the Earthquake Fruit to destroy the gates, and then also the, Darkness Fruit to maybe stop the Whirlpool with his gravity shenanigans, because that's at least where I think that Oda's taking the story in. If Davy D. Jones is sealed away inside the gates of justice, his descendant will have to free him. Blackbeard seems to carry the will of Xebec, and I'm very confident that if any of this is actually true, he's probably gonna play a massive part in doing that. Either him or Loki will, since he's the other person who seems to carry Xebec's will. Personally, I'm kinda on Team Loki just because I think he's pretty cool and awesome, and seeing him break down those gates with his big bad hammer Ragnir would be pretty hype. I'd be down for that, but Earthquake Fruit works as well. Either way, the biggest reason that I actually think that it's Davy sealed down there is, well, it's his name. In our real world's mythology and One Piece mythology, Davy Jones is the Spectre of the Deep, a demonic figure that punishes pirates, dragging them down to Davy Jones' locker, aka the abyss of the ocean floor. So what if that's what these gates are actually sealing away? They could be the 3 literal seals that Emu based their abyss markers on as well. I mean, we do know that there are 3 stages to the markings given to the Holy Knights that represent the abyss, and this would tie imperfectly to these 3 gates. 3 massive gates sealing away the full power of the abyss, tying into all that weird petty nonsense that Emu seems to have with Davy Jones, and that's why the tier system for the Holy Knights might also be in 3 seals of the abyss that can unlock, very similar to the giant 3 seals of the abyss on the gates of justice. Maybe each level of the Holy Knight seals, the surface, the deep sea, and the seafloor pacts are actually tied to Davy himself, sealed inside of these gates. And really, when you think about it, it does line up pretty well, right? I mean, Blackbeard having the Darkness Fruit, it's a literal abyss of power, which could be just like his ancestors' true power too. For all we know, Davy D. Jones might just be the god of the abyss, and Emu's just sort of just stealing his thunder right now. I mean, Emu's clearly a body snatcher and a power borer, so maybe they do this at a much larger scale as well. Wouldn't be the first time Oda is foreshadowing something like that in a smaller way first. It also would explain why Emu placed the world government biggest strongholds around these 3 gates. In many mythologies, demons or primordial beings are sealed beneath mountains like Kronos. They're also often sealed beneath oceans like Tiamat, or beneath giant structures like the Japanese Oni sealed under temples. And don't tell anyone, but I actually have my own demon sealed away inside of the Ohara Patreon. I buried him beneath a bunch of exclusive premium content and even some free stuff like the Opinion Piece, a weekly One Piece newsletter. Check it out, but don't unleash the demon god I have sealed away there, because, come on, no one wants that. But for reals though, what is sealed below the entire military might of the world government? The Abyss and Davy Jones, the ancient king of the world, stuck in his kingdom underneath the new kingdom, Maurizio. I mean, seriously, what better way to guard a seal than to build your own new empire around it? Maybe that also explains why Xebec needs the Galela, because they were incredibly talented builders, and it's clear with their modern day branch that they build more than just regular ships. The Galela, probably frozen in Punk Hazard, might have built these gates, and Xebec needs them to dismantle them so that Davy can be free once again. And the real big kicker for me is that it all might explain the entire flooding thing. Like seriously, what better way to ensure that nobody goes deep below to find him than to just flood the entire world on top of things? Like, as I said way at the beginning of this video, these gates were very likely built way before the world was ever flooded, and after seeing the insane powers of the Abyss, I don't think it's too much to say that Davy D. Jones may not have always been a good figure. Xebec himself seems like a pretty stand-up guy, but Blackbeard isn't. I mean, maybe in some weird twist of fate, Emu is a hero by sealing away Davy Jones and was just corrupted by his dark powers. Maybe, just maybe, Oda will actually come full circle and make the true big bad of the One Piece world the spooky enemy of all real-life pirates, Davy Jones. That would be a twist. And weirdly enough, it would actually work really well with what Vegapunk was saying in his big message, right? He couldn't quite place if Emu or Joy Boy were the real villain of the Void Century. It was this morally gray period, and the true history is much more complicated than anything we ever imagined. Maybe this idea that Emu was doing the world a favor was actually teased during that message, which kind of makes me wonder, what else might we have missed? Well, to find out, you can check this very long video where I actually break down the entire Vegapunk speech at the end of Egghead Island, since it will surely come back around soon enough. Thanks for watching, thanks to our Patreons, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. That was weird and awkward. I'm gonna leave now.